Spirituality. I'm Neshama of IamNeshama.com, where we help you develop a spiritual approach to life, creativity, and personal growth. This week's episode of SOS is part 2 to our discussion on divine provision, where we identified 3 different types of provisions that are made accessible to us through the application of faith. This week, I'd like to share some examples from my own life that highlight some of the issues that cause a disconnect between ourselves and the divine provisions that are supplied for us. The first is always opting to do what we can do in our own strength. I didn't realize that this is what I was doing because in my mind, when things worked out, it meant that the Most High had made a way for it to work out. It didn't dawn on me that when things worked out, it was because I was just kept shifting things around. So for those of you who don't know, I'm an artist and I would have this vision for this piece that I would want to create. And I would be so excited about this new project that I would run out immediately and buy the paints that I needed, different gessels that I needed, canvases, and I would have these art supplies for this project that I wanted to, start, but I didn't have the time to start it or, the excitement anymore to actually sit down and dive in. So art supplies would be sitting there, and I'm one of those people that I never throw away receipts, and there would be times where I wouldn't have any funds and a bill would be about to be due. And I would be thinking to myself like, oh my goodness, like how am I gonna pay this bill? And the stress of it would just get to me and I would be trying to figure out, okay, what can I do? What can I do to make some extra cash this month? Or, how am I gonna be able to pay this bill? And then like me constantly looking around and trying to figure out things that I could shift. And then I would stumble upon like my receipts for these art supplies that I hadn't even used and hadn't even opened. And I would think to myself, okay, maybe if I return these, I can get my cash back and I'll use that cash to pay the bills. And then when I'm actually ready to start the project that I had envisioned, then I'll go back and I'll repurchase the supplies. And this would work. Like I would go and I would just return, the supplies that I hadn't used or whatever, and they would give me back the cash for it. And I would go and pay the bill and I would feel so comfortable because I would feel like, wow, the Most High knew that I was going to be in this position where I wasn't going to be able to pay this bill. And that's the reason why I never got to start that art project, because he knew I was going to need to return these supplies to get the money to pay this bill. So like in my mind, it was all working together and it was the Most High providing a way out of that situation. And that's how I looked at it. But recently, I realized that what I was doing was what could be done in my own strength. And it was without regard for the Most High's divine provision, which would have looked more like me saying, okay, you knew I would come to this point where I was not going to be able to pay this bill. So what is the provision that you supplied for this moment that you knew I would come to? But instead of being able to honor that moment that I was in and to be okay and respect the vulnerability of the position that I was in, I didn't want to feel vulnerable and I didn't want to feel like my back was against the wall and I didn't want to feel like there was no way for me to pay this bill. So I kept shifting the situation and overturning the situation until I saw a clear way to alleviate the problem or the lack. In order to access what the Most High has laid out for you, you first have to stop looking for what you can lay out for yourself. And this misconception that I hear a lot from people, which is like, God helps those that help themselves. And as you start to go through your spiritual journey and you start to develop a higher level of faith or a deeper level of faith, you start to realize that sayings like this are popular, but they're not necessarily true. Truth is that the Most High just helps. He just helps. And He'll help you where you are. So in other words, divine provisions are supplied to us in the manner in which we are willing to receive them. So if you are willing to receive them in a state of vulnerability, I do not know how I'm going to pay this bill. I am not going to continually look for how I can provide a way for me to pay this bill. But you knew that I would come to this point where I needed this bill to be paid. What are the provisions that you supplied for this moment that you knew I would find myself in? Because he did know when I was purchasing those art supplies that there was going to come a moment when I needed cash to do something else. Yet he still enabled me the provisions for that day to purchase these supplies, because in my heart what I really desired to do was to start a project, was to create something new. But because of my own fear and my own doubt about so many things, I didn't allow myself that freedom. I didn't give myself the free time to start that project because I felt like there were other things that I needed to be doing, because I, in my mind, knew that there were things I needed to provide for in my life. And I didn't give myself the liberty to be taken care of, if that makes sense.